Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and his comments, the comments he made about Jews, about Hitler, and about the Holocaust. Patently false comments, lies. Speaking to his compatriots in arms, speaking in Arabic, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas declared that Hitler murdered Jews because they were money lenders. He excused Hitler, explaining that the mass murder was trying to solve a social economic problem. Abbas explained away the Holocaust, saying that Jews were killed not because they were Jewish, but because of their history of money lending. This distortion of history was put forth by the Palestinian president in an address he gave before the Palestinian Revolutionary Council. Time after time, Abbas's hate speech, his awful speech, his anti-Jewish, anti-West remarks are not translated. He speaks to the Arab world. To rile up the Arab world, this speech was no exception. The behavior, the obvious snub of the Western world, is nothing new for Abbas. Let's say on May 4th, 2018, in a speech to the Palestinian National Council, Abbas proclaimed that Jews living in Europe were persecuted every 10 to 15 years in some country since the 11th century until the Holocaust. And this, according to Abbas, is the reason why. They say hatred against the Jew was not because of their religion, it was because of their social profession. So the Jewish issue that had spread against the Jews across Europe was not because of their religion, it was because of usury and banks. Jews from Arab countries did not want to emigrate, but were forced to do so by Israel, unquote. Abbas is not alone in this obfuscated thinking. It is a prevailing attitude towards the Jew in the Middle East, among Arabs and Muslims. It is part of a repetitive educational bent that both rejects the Holocaust and elevates Hitler and Nazism. Throughout the Arab and Muslim world, there is a culture of disinformation in schools and mosques about Jews and Israel and the Holocaust. There is an educational culture that embraces facts that are contrary to some of the most commonly accepted and understood axioms of Western history and culture. The Holocaust, its existence, its history, and its horrors is but one example. Mahmoud Abbas's doctoral dissertation was written in 1982 in Moscow at the Patrice Lumumba University. His official degree was Candidate of Sciences, which was the Soviet equivalent of a PhD. Abbas's dissertation was entitled The Other Side, The Secret Relationship Between Nazism and Zionism. It was published in book form in 1984 and then republished in 2011 and can be purchased today on the official website of the Palestinian Authority and on Abbas's official webpage. Abbas claims that the Zionists colluded with the Nazis to murder the Jews of Europe to stimulate a mass exodus to Palestine. He claims that 6 million Jews were not murdered. It was an exaggeration. That 800,000 were more likely murdered. He claims that there were no gas chambers. The only creative element in his entire work is when Abbas actually analyzes how Zionists used persecution of the Jews of Europe to their benefit. He won't let go of these falsehoods and these tropes. He keeps repeating them. In a recent rant about Jews, a rant that was delivered in Arabic again and not translated, Abbas said, "The truth that we should clarify to the world is that European Jews are not Semites. They have nothing to do with anti-Semitism." And then claiming that Great Britain and the United States actually created the idea of Jewish statehood, Abbas explained that, quote, "I am saying this so we should know who we should accuse of being our enemy, who has harmed us and took our homeland away and gave it to the Israelis or the Jews," unquote. In other words, it was the English and the Americans who took Palestinian homes and Palestinian land. It is they who gave it all to the Jews. And earlier this year, speaking to supporters, Abbas put forth the claim that Israel has perpetrated 50 Holocausts against the Palestinians. In laying claim to this absurd comparison, Abbas said, and we're quoting again, "The Israelis and the Zionists continue their false claims that Israel made the desert bloom. Palestine was a desert, and they made it bloom. A paradise? They can't but lie. But what can we do? They lie like Goebbels, they lie and lie until people believe," unquote. But it is his lies are so blatant. Even Sarah Idan, the woman crowned Miss Iraq, condemned the Palestinian president. Her tweet was simple. She synopsized Abbas's speech and wrote, "Shame on every leader who gave money to this anti-Semite," unquote. The mayor of Paris, Mayor Anne Hidalgo, revoked the honor they gave, the highest honor Paris has to give, from Mahmoud Abbas. She did not mince words, emphasizing that the honor was revoked because Abbas's, quote, "clear desire to deny the genocide to which the Jewish populations of Europe were victims at the hands of the Nazi regime," unquote. The mayor of Paris said that Abbas's comments were, again quoting, "are contrary to our universal values and the historical truth of the Holocaust. So you can no longer claim the highest distinction of Paris. I condemn your comments in the strongest possible terms. No cause can justify revisionism and negationism. As you know, the Holocaust is a part of the history of Paris," unquote. The ideas that Mahmoud Abbas repeats over and over in Arabic are endemic to Palestinian Arabic society. They are very hard to correct, especially because Arab leaders who are supposedly open and friendly to the West reiterate them time and again. Changing an attitude about a firm conviction is very difficult to accomplish. Think back to the argument that the earth is not flat. Galileo, in the 1600s, was not the first. Columbus and his adventures were supposed to prove the spherical nature of the earth, and that they would not sail off the edge of the earth. Sailors knew this because the horizon was rounded, so they really understood it, but they were a small minority. It will take a very long time for Arabic culture to recognize the truth about Israel, about the Holocaust, and about Jews. It will not and cannot happen until leaders like Abbas stop preaching their canards and falsehoods and start teaching the truth. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is an editorial from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on September 10th, 2023, and it's entitled "Tamir Pardo Crossed a Red Line." Editorial, subtitled, "In an interview with the Associated Press on Wednesday, Pardo claimed that Israel is implementing an apartheid state policy against Palestinians in the West Bank." Please remember that an editorial is the opinion of the editorial board. There is no named author. The ideas are agreed upon by the editorial board in the meeting, and then one person is assigned to craft the message. Most of the time, the draft is sent around for additional comments by editorial members, by board members, before it's dropped into the paper or appears online. In this case, the editors at the Jerusalem Post are extremely displeased with the former head of the Mossad, who compared Israel to apartheid South Africa. He was not only wrong, he should have known better. This is how the editors begin. Former Mossad chief Tamir Pardo is the latest in a line of former top officials to cross the line in his desire to bring down Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government. In an interview with the Associated Press on Wednesday, Pardo claimed that Israel is implementing an apartheid state policy against Palestinians in the West Bank. In a territory where two people are judged under two legal systems, that is an apartheid, Pardo said, who was the Mossad chief from 2011 to 2016. Although he limited his comments to the West Bank, they will almost certainly be used to attack all of Israel on international platforms. The fact that Pardo held such a senior position would appear to add credence to his words. Unfortunately, his comments are factually flawed. The editorial continues. As the Post's Tova Lazaroff explained last week, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, which is home to more than 2 million Palestinians and 500,000 Israelis, is divided into 3 sections, Area A, B, and C, in accordance with the 1993 Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Areas A and B, which comprise 40% of the West Bank, are under the auspices of the Palestinian Authority. The remainder of the West Bank, Area C, some 60%, is under Israel's military and civilian control. The nearly 500,000 Israelis who live there are under IDF military rule, but maintain the same individual rights as those who live in sovereign Israel. The more than 300,000 Palestinians who live there, that is in Area C, are also live under IDF military rule, but maintain some rights from the Palestinian Authority. Now, the editors explain that Israel is not South Africa, and Israel is not apartheid, and does not have apartheid. They continue by saying, this situation, while not optimal, is not one of apartheid. And one can easily imagine the international uproar were Israel to unilaterally impose Israeli law on Palestinians. This complicated situation has existed since Israel took control of the territories 56 years ago in the Six-Day War, a war the Arab world launched on the Jewish state with the stated aim of annihilating it. The apartheid libel has become a useful tool to such bodies as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the open-ended United Nations Committee of Inquiry. Their efforts focus only on Israel's supposed crimes, serving to legitimize the world's sole Jewish state, providing fuel for anti-Israel incitement through distortions, misrepresentations, does nothing to solve the conflict with the Palestinians. Rather, it helps perpetuate the hostilities. If Pardo is truly concerned for Israel's security and the well-being of the Palestinians, he should carefully consider his words and their ramifications. In conclusion, the editors explain the implications of the statements made and the sentiments expressed by Pardo. The editorial continues, such attacks by Pardo and others inspired by personal motivations against the current government and its head weaken the Jewish state while emboldening its enemies and detractors. To liken the situation to apartheid not only wrongs Israel, it belittles what black South Africans suffered during the country's actual apartheid regime. It is entirely legitimate to criticize Netanyahu and his policies, but trying to force his hand by libeling the whole country down is not. Pardo crossed the line. He should have known better. A very well stated editorial. You got to know where the red lines are. There's no question about it. Next up is a column from the Jewish Press, and it was written by Rabbi Elie Michel, and it was entitled, How I Failed as an American Rabbi. This column was published on September 8th, 2023. This is how Rabbi Michel begins. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Sitting in synagogue, Jews listen to the rabbi's sermon, and like a gentle wave at the beach, it washes over us without leaving a trace. As a prematurely retired pulpit rabbi, I can attest that the rabbi himself often experiences the same thing. I would give a sermon, share a beautiful idea about a Bible verse, and then move on. How often did I fail to observe the very lesson I was sharing with my congregants? Far more often than I am comfortable admitting. But then there are moments, rare moments, when something we hear or read pierces the heavy armor that so effectively protects us from true feeling. Moments when our hearts of stone are replaced, just for a moment, with hearts of flesh. This week, while rereading a 1956 essay by Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, The Voice of My Beloved Knocks, Kol Dodido Fake, I experienced one of these rare moments, and I understood for the first time that Rabbi Soloveitchik was speaking to me. 2 years after leaving my synagogue and making Aliyah to Israel, it hit me that despite all the meaningful moments I experienced as a community rabbi, despite all the accomplishments I could point to, growing our community, helping people in need, supporting people during their most painful moments, in the most significant way, I failed. Michelle goes into detail explaining Job and the rabbinic issues connected to Job's role in the world. It's not an easy discussion. He writes, 140 years ago, following the horrific pogroms of 1881 and 1882, the American Jewish poet Emma Lazarus wrote, "I do not hesitate to say that our national defect is that we are not tribal enough. We do not sufficient solidarity to perceive that when the life and property of a Jew in the uttermost provinces of the Caucasus are attacked, the dignity of a Jew in free America is humiliated. Until we are free, we are none of us free." An epistle to the Hebrews. Please don't allow your busy schedules to blind you to the intifada ravaging our people as we speak. When you hear the news and yet another young mother or father murdered, don't sigh and then move on with your life. When you visit Israel, don't come here only to be inspired. Visit Jews who are suffering, who have lost loved ones. Gather your friends together and raise awareness. Share articles, write letters to the editor, and raise money for terror victims. Call your congressman, and then call them again and again. Become an activist. At the very end of Dr. Seuss's classic, The Lorax, the Oler, the little boy, the Lorax, said nothing, just gave me a glance. And I gave a very sad backwards glance. And all that the Lorax left there is in this mess was a small pile of rocks with one word, unless. Whatever that meant, well, I just couldn't guess. That was long, long ago. But each day since that day, I've sat here and worried away. But now, says the once Lord, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Rabbi Michelle concludes by writing, our enemies will keep murdering us with impunity unless. Very interesting, thoughtful, and introspective column. Thank you so very much, Rabbi Michelle. Coming up next, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 7 headlines and memes today. The first is a headline that is both hilarious and sad at the same time. If it were not true, it would not be so tragically funny. The headline reads, Portland public schools no longer allowed to issue zeros for cheating or missing work under new equity grading guidance. In education, grades are actually termed assessments in the literature. It will be very difficult to assess any subject mastery or any competence without criteria like doing the work. How can you learn without being exposed to the material and then learning it? Wow. Sad and tragic. This next headline is just as tragically funny. It reads, all hands lost. China may have lost a stealth nuclear attack sub with, and then someone penciled in their own comment. With what? What did they lose it with? This headline leaves us hanging. And while I do not know what they lost on the sub, I can probably assume that the Chinese sub was a nuclear-powered and armed dangerous weapons sub, maybe even nuclear weapons. Now another headline. It's a commentary about crazy situations in our cities, many of which are now simply unsafe. The headline reads, thieves steal wallet and keys from California council member Kalima Pryforce while he was speaking to the public about crime. That is truly a sad comment on our society. Unbelievable. This next headline and short story is very similar to the last one. If this wasn't true, it's really in the news, the comedy would be unbelievable. But it is true. The headline reads, Chicago news crew robbed at gunpoint while covering an armed robbery. How does that even happen? Today's thieves are so brazen, they even are on camera. When the camera is rolling, they go ahead and commit the crimes anyhow. Dastardly deeds they are. This next is a comment and a headline. It's a meme connected to a warning sign. The warning sign, do not take selfies with fluffy cows. The cows are really buffalo. The picture has a buffalo with a pair of jeans on its horns. One can only guess what happened. This final meme is hilarious. It is a famous painting by Agnolo Bronzino from 1545 entitled Portrait of a Girl. The girl is not smiling. The meme reads, "Welcome to adulthood, where you are irritated when they rearrange the grocery store." I can attest to that. Get very irritated when that happens. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Israel's current head of the Mossad, David Barnea, reported that the spy agency has disrupted 27 attempted terrorist strikes by Iran against Israelis and Jews around the world in the past year. 27. Barnea added that since the world can now see Iran's culpability, it was time to exact a price from the regime in Tehran. The Mossad actually held a ceremony recently to mark the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and for the first time in all these years, revealed information provided by intelligence sources that were used in the years before the war. Mossad head David Barnea spoke at the ceremony and said, and I'm quoting here, "We should not stop dealing with the existential threat to the state of Israel. We should not underestimate the enemy and his capabilities. We should not exaggerate the support of our allies in times of crisis. And we should not underestimate the importance of unity in order to survive. Our strength is in our inner unity. We must act to assert our power of deterrence and strive for normalizations. A country that despises the pursuit of peace is doomed to be drawn into war," unquote. Excellent. In a statement addressed to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the head of Israel's Druze community, Sheikh Mofak Tarif, addressed the problems plaguing his community and called on the state to, quote, "do a real and deep soul searching in its relationship with the members of the Druze community in Israel," unquote. Tarif warned of the consequences of not finding immediate solutions to the issues of policing and enforcement, construction, planning, and regulating the residences in the Druze communities in the Galilee and the Carmel, and called on the Prime Minister to get involved. At the end of his address, which was delivered to a group composed of senior ministers, the head of the Shin Bet, and the head of the National Assembly, Tarif warned that without solutions, the Druze protests will take on a different face, and we will wake up to a different reality that we do not want, unquote. A powerful idea, very powerful. In an unprecedented move, the Vatican announced they are beatifying a Polish family of 9, quote, "a married couple and their small children," unquote, who were executed by the Nazis during World War II for sheltering Jews. Last year, Pope Francis pronounced the deeply Catholic Ulma family, including the child that Victoria Ulma was pregnant with, to be martyrs for the faith. This pronouncement paved the way for the beatification mass that took place in the family's home in the village of Markowa in southeastern Poland. The Ulmas were killed in their home by German Nazi troops and by Nazi-controlled local police in the early hours of March 24th, 1944. They were slaughtered together with 8 Jews they were hiding at their home. It is believed that the Ulma family was betrayed by local Poles in the village. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has claimed that Russian leader Vladimir Putin was behind the death of the mutinous mercenary boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, who died in an unexplained plane crash along with his top lieutenants last month. The United States said it has halted a multi-million-dollar shipment of crude oil by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, being shipped in violations of sanctions against Iran. The U.S. says that it has seized more than 980,000 barrels of contraband crude oil. According to a statement released by the U.S. Justice Department, the illicit sale and transport of Iranian oil violated sanctions targeting Iran. In the recent incident, the Justice Department also made public that in April, Suez Rajan Limited pleaded guilty to violating sanctions against Iran. The Justice Department termed the guilty plea the first criminal resolution to such a sanctions violation. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that while the U.S., Israeli, and Saudi leaders have put many elements of the pathway to normalization on the table, there is still much work to do. Sullivan spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One as President Joe Biden flew to India to attend the G20 summit. In his words, many of the elements of a pathway to normalization are now on the table. We don't have a framework. We don't have the terms ready to be signed. There is still work to do. Sullivan went on to say, there was a broad understanding of many key elements, but he gave no details as to what they were. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Druze are not Muslims? Druze are a group, more like a tribe. Their belief system is semi-secret. It's a religion composed of about 1 million followers. The Druze are monotheists. Their system of belief is a combination of Ismailism, Christianity, Buddhism, Neoplatonism, Zoroastrianism, and a few other things. Druze were historically persecuted, and still are actually to this day, by their Muslim neighbors. Their Ismailism is a breakoff of Shiite Islam. They are found in Lebanon, Syria, and Israel by and large. The Druze is an unusual name. It's not a positive name at all for them, but it is their name. The Druze were named after Muhammad Ismail al-Natashin Darazi. Ad-Darazi means from Darazi, someone who's from Daraz. That means someone who's a Druze. But the original character named Ad-Darazi was actually seen as a heretic by them as well as the Muslims around them. They did not choose the name. Others called them a Druze, and the name stuck. The most important element to know about the Druze is that they are country loyal. Israel's Druze serve in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. They are exceptional trackers. There's a hill actually in Israel close to the border with Syria, and family members live on both sides of the border. They live in two warring countries, some in Israel and some in Syria. The family gathers on each side of the hill and shout to one another. That's how they communicate. There are no phone lines that connect Israel and Syria. They meet and talk literally long distance with blowhorns. It's fascinating. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.